I believe that for many people, training mobility will bring about more in terms of functional movement gains than will training strength. That being said, it's far less common to hear people talking about mobility or see them performing mobility drills in the gym as compared with lifting heavy weights. The obvious reason for this is that compared with lifting weights, stretching and doing mobility drills isn't that glamorous and can be a little bit boring. But what if I told you you could improve your mobility without ever performing a single stretch? So here on The Pioneer, I'm all about bang for your buck exercises. Why perform an exercise that does one useful thing when you could perform an exercise that has 20 different benefits for you? And a great example of this is using movements that build strength and mobility at the exact same time. So what I'm talking about here is a form of weighted stretching or loaded mobility. However, it's not quite that, because weighted stretching or loaded mobility imply that you're using weights to get into a stretched position, but that's the main goal of the movement. What I'm talking about here is selecting specifically those movements that target strength and build a lot of strength and performance, but have the added benefit of also improving your mobility. So you're not dedicating time to training mobility, you're just getting it as this nice side effect. So what we're looking at here is movements that have a deep range of motion affecting muscle groups that are regularly tight and difficult to move. So if you remember, I very recently talked about the benefits of using a partial range of motion. Now I'm talking about the benefits of using an extreme range of motion, and as you can see, they're both useful, so neither approach is going to trump the other. It's more about combining them in useful and interesting ways. And the best part of this is that you actually get superior benefits, both in terms of the strength and in terms of the mobility. Because mobility, as many of you probably know by now, is not the same as flexibility. Flexibility is your ability to get into a position however is necessary. So using someone else to push you into that position, or leaning your leg up against a bar, or even pulling it there with your own arms. Mobility is the ability to get yourself into that position using just your own effort. So the strength is just as important here as the elasticity of the antagonistic muscles. It's not necessarily just about being flexible, it's about being strong enough to overcome the resistance provided by the antagonistic muscle. And it's also about being able to relax the antagonistic muscle so that it's not tensing up and preventing you from moving the way you want to move. This is something you can learn, and using weights is a great way to do that. So when you use a weight, you're getting deep into that position, but you're still using your strength because you need to control the weight and control that motion. And then you need to lift yourself out of it again. And at the same time, because you're using the weight, you can get yourself deeper into that stretch than you otherwise would be able to. You might also be able to improve your tendon strength. There's a study that shows how performing heel dips, weighted heel dips, but at a deficit so that there's a stretch on the calves, can help to improve tendinopathy. At the same time, there might be hypertrophy and strength benefits because you're training through a greater range of motion, thus creating more opportunity for hypertrophy. And in a previous video on weighted stretching, I talked about the mounting anecdotal evidence there is for the beneficial effects of stretching during an exercise. We look at people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who used pec flies with a large range of motion and would feel the stretch and the burn in the pecs, and this would lead to greater size. And by getting greater strength and control in deeper ranges of motion, you can prevent injury by controlling yourself when you're slipping and falling, and at the same time, you can power yourself through from positions that would otherwise be weak in, thereby enhancing your athletic performance. So by just incorporating some of these exercises that have a deep range of motion, including a weight, you can gain athletic benefits, you can improve your mobility, and you can even potentially help to strengthen and heal your tendons, so there's really no reason not to experiment with this. So of course it wouldn't be very fair or helpful of me to talk about how beneficial these weighted stretches are without actually demonstrating a few of my favourite ones that you can incorporate into your workouts. Let's start with one I talked about in my Fortify workout video, that being the Sumo Squat. And all you're going to do here is a squat with much wider legs. And you can either use your body weight as the weight, or you can hold an additional dumbbell. Make sure that your toes and your knees are lined up so you're not splaying your toes out in a funny direction. And then lower yourself to a point where you feel that stretch on the insides of the thighs. You can then add a leg lift at the top of the movement if you like to make this even more challenging, and this way you're strengthening and stretching both the hip adductors and hip abductors, which is something that a lot of us are once again lacking, partly owing to the fact that we simply don't move that much in the frontal plane, certainly not in the gym. And improving your hip mobility and your strength this way will not only help you to avoid falls if you're trail running, for example, or just walking off the beaten path, you can also prevent injuries by helping your knee to track better, so this is a great one to incorporate. Dead hangs are another great one for improving shoulder mobility in particular. I talked about this very recently in my shoulder video, but essentially what you're doing is just stretching out the lats and the pecs and maintaining this overhead position with your arms. And what you want to do is a passive dead hang, which means that you're just allowing your weight to completely hang as much as possible. If you find this painful or difficult, then you can use a little bit of assistance from your legs to begin with, but the idea is not to be actively engaging the muscles to pull yourself up at all. Let your shoulders shrug up by your ears. In terms of bang for your buck, you're not only building great grip strength by doing this and not only decompressing the spine, but there's nothing to stop you from raising your leg. Of course, here once again, your body is the weight, but there's also nothing stopping you from holding weight between your knees or on your feet if you want to make it a little bit more of a intense stretch. Poor squat mobility can come down to tight calves and ankles, as well as hip flexors and all kinds of other things. Fortunately, one of the best ways to improve your squat mobility is just to do lots of squats. And if you aim to go deep, not to the point where it's extremely uncomfortable, just a little bit deeper using a slightly lighter weight so that you can get out of that position, then this small amount of weight on your shoulders or held in front of you or wherever can help to push you a little bit deeper and improve your mobility that way. Also surprisingly effective for squat mobility is the pistol squat. When you perform a pistol squat, you really have no place to hide, because if you don't have the necessary mobility, you're just going to fall over, particularly if you don't have the ankle mobility, you're likely to fall backwards. The great thing about holding a weight at the same time as doing this is that this will then help you to ease into the deeper position, but at the same time it also acts as a counterbalance. So if you are a bit back heavy, it'll then bring you back forwards. Of course, you can also use the pistol squat by holding onto a wall or a rope to balance, or you can put one foot up onto something higher, which makes the mobility challenge a little bit easier. And then of course you can get closer and closer to the ground over time. Then of course there's the Cossack Squat, which I'm a huge fan of, where you're essentially doing a kind of side lunge but heading all the way down, keeping your heel flat on the ground once again. And this trains all kinds of mobility as well as strength, and is a fantastic way to build up to the pistol squat. For hamstring mobility, one of the best things you can do is the good morning. And here you're going to have the weight on your shoulders, maybe slightly lower down. Then you're going to hinge at the hips, keeping the weight over the midline of the foot. You can start with just a bar even. You want to keep this very, very light. And this of course will get a nice stretch on the hamstrings, once again, more than you can probably easily achieve on your own. But at the same time, it's also a great exercise for strengthening the lower back and teaching you the hip hinge movement. Obviously you have things like the Jefferson curl, which are fantastic for this kind of pike mobility. However, if we're looking at exercises that provide other benefits and that aren't just all about the mobility, then I think that this one is particularly effective, and it's something that a lot more people are going to feel comfortable doing. Also commonly missing for a lot of people is thoracic mobility in the mid-spine. If you're looking for an exercise that can train this while at the same time providing a bunch of other benefits, then look no further than the Hindu push-up. In the Hindu push-up, you start off in a kind of downward dog position, dive bomb towards the ground to a lower press-up position, and then you lift your chest up, trying to extend the spine and really focusing on making sure that you're extending at the sternum or just below the shoulder blades rather than the lower back. Then you can return to that starting position again. If you try and keep your heels mostly on the ground at the same time, then you'll also get a nice hamstring and calf stretch in here as well. And of course, you're also getting all the benefits of a push-up. And another one that's great for overhead shoulder mobility, for stretching the pecs and lats, is the Dumbbell Pullover, which is also just a great exercise for building the pecs and lats. I'm going to demonstrate you here in the worst possible way. So that's the split squat, which Ben Patrick is a big fan of. It's a fantastic exercise, not only for stretching the hip flexors, which is something that's extremely tight on 90% of desk workers, but it's also great for ankle mobility because you're leaning forward so much. At the same time, you're getting the benefits of a squat. It's great for building stronger legs through a massive range of motion, and just watching Ben Patrick perform is a testament to how powerful this movement can be. He can dunk and all sorts of things, but he also managed to get the scissor split without stretching for it specifically. And for the calves, what you can do is a calf raise, but starting with your heel much lower than the ball of your foot, whether you put it on a wedge or just pile up some plates. So you can feel the stretch in the calf before you begin. This is also a great way to get stubborn calves to grow. Most of us already have the strength we need to lift pretty much everything that we lift regularly in our day-to-day lives. However, if you're very tight in your hamstrings, if you've got tight rounded shoulders, and if you've got tight hip flexors, this creates all these kind of compensatory movement patterns and all these odd postures. And now when you try and exert that strength at an awkward angle, you can end up hurting yourself because something is far more likely to tear or pull if you don't have that little bit of slack, that little bit of leeway to allow yourself to move in a comfortable and free way. I think so many people could benefit from focusing on this a little bit instead of just thinking, hey, I want to get into shape, I'm just going to pile on lots and lots of weight. So my goal at the moment in my training is to improve my own mobility whilst maintaining my strength. And when you start to do this, you feel so much more free, you're able to move so much more freely, and you realise that a lot of what you thought of as kind of tiredness or fatigue is actually just tightness caused by sitting in the same position all day and moving incorrectly. Once you gain that mobility again, once you relax those muscles, you feel liberated because you're able to move so much more freely, you feel so much more energetic, and you can express that strength through a greater range of motion. I hope you found this video useful and interesting, guys. If you did, then please leave a like and share it around. That helps me out so much and I massively appreciate it. If you like this kind of training that looks not only at strength and aesthetics, but also your overall performance and how you move in the real world, then you might enjoy my ebook and training program, Super Functional Training. There's a discount on right now, and there's a link in the description down below. There you can also find a link to my physical book, Functional Training and Beyond, which is available from all good bookstores, including Amazon, and that's an introduction to functional training and how it affects not only athletes, but everybody else. So check it out if you're interested. Either way, thank you so much for watching this one. Subscribe if you want to see more like it, hit the bell button for notifications, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.